I think the easiest way to do this is you just build a good offensive team that hits the ball hard and on a line and doesn't rely on the home run. Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic. Patrick, today we're doing an always fun mailbag episode. The readers came out in force, the listeners came out in force on Twitter and gave us plenty of things to address. I always enjoy these because fans have plenty to complain about or like just questions answered, but a lot of it, after another 83 and 79 season, they're gonna it's not always the most positive way of looking at things, and that's perfectly fine. Well, why don't we just get right to it? What do we got to kick it off?
Well, yeah, I mean, you said it. We love the mailbag because our readers and listeners, it helps us know what people are talking about, what they're thinking about, helps us formulate ideas and articulate kind of what we're seeing. And this account, aptly named Cubs account, must know, Sahadev, that you are the resident Wrigley weather conspiracy theorist. And so we've got question. Jed pointed to the variability of the wind at Wrigley for this year's downturn in offensive performance. Does he have explicit plans to address that? How would you address it? Morel and Wisdom weren't able to beat the wind any better than the lesser exit velocity guys.
Yeah. So, I think weather is fascinating at Wrigley because it has changed over the years and the wind doesn't seem to blow out as much. I also think we need to be careful about parsing what Jed's saying. We need to really listen to what Jed's saying. I think Jed was explaining individual performances more than making excuses for the team or talking about future team building. It definitely impacted the individual, but the teams, as a whole, both teams played in it, right? So you can't use that as an excuse. Now, I think it's interesting. There are different ways to look at this. Someone suggested, Bruce Levine suggested, you need to get guys that hit the ball even further, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you address it. And I'm not sure if that's the case. Remember when the Yankees came to town and Aaron Judge saw one knocked down, Juan Soto saw one knocked down. I don't know if there's you always are going to go back to that Patrick Wisdom one that he hit 112 miles per hour. That should have been out on the street, and somehow it got knocked down. And then one that Pedro Pages hit ends up in the basket because he just hit it, 30 feet, to the right, and that changes everything about it. I don't think you can go about building a team based on the weather because you don't know what the weather is going to be. There was something that Jed said that I think got completely overlooked, and I need to do research on it. But he said all the times it was blowing out was when they were on the road, and that to me is the thing. It was just randomness that they were on the road, that they were at home when it was all the times that it was blowing in. So you can't build a team based on the wind blowing in. I think the easiest way to do this is you just build a good offensive team that hits the ball hard and on a line. It doesn't rely on the home run.
Yes.
So, that's the simple answer, yes, exit velocity guys like Patrick Wisdom and Christopher Morel were dinged by this in a certain way because they had balls knocked down. But Cody Bellinger certainly was impacted by this, as we saw with his home road splits. They were insane. Seiya Suzuki had better road numbers than home numbers, but he was really good at home still. He was basically his season at home was basically the season Ian Happ had overall. That's really good. Ian Happ had a really good season offensively. So, I don't think this is something that you address as I don't think the Cubs should have the wind in mind when looking at the future. I think analyzing what happened in the past, it's important to understand that the wind blew in a lot at Wrigley. So if you're looking at Cody Bellinger's overall numbers and saying 109 weighted runs created plus wasn't good enough, okay, what happened this season? Why was it a 109? It's the same way you should have analyzed his 2023. That whatever it was, 130 weighted runs created plus. That's awesome. That's a borderline star production. But what happened? How did he get there? Right. And I think he's somewhere in between that 109 and that whatever 134 that he had in 2023, because the wind did play a factor at Wrigley. So I think it's more about analyzing what happened than trying to build a team for the future, and understanding the value of the players that played at Wrigley and how that dinged them. It also, I think, you have to also look at the positives. Like we talked about Shota's season. Jameson Taillon doesn't strike out a lot of guys and doesn't put a lot of balls on the ground. Like you have to factor that in. So like these types of things, it goes both ways. Like the offense could get better next year if the wind's blowing out, but now you have to account for pitchers and how much they miss bats. Shota, I think, will be okay because he misses so many bats and he doesn't walk guys. You have to wonder about Jameson Taillon regressing a little bit at Wrigley. I haven't looked at his home road splits. That maybe that's something interesting to look at. I just wouldn't overreact to this.
I mean, Counsell was on the record towards the end of the season being like, no, you don't change anything in terms of roster construction.
Right.
Just saying, like, we don't know what the weather's going to be next year. Do you know what the weather's going to be next year? Like, he was acknowledged it was different, I think, but was not saying the Cubs should go about things any differently because of that. So that seems pretty. He sounded pretty definitive when he was dismissing that, which was a conversation that went all the way back to opening day with you and him, right?
Right. Yes. Oddly enough, I brought it up in Texas how Wrigley doesn't play like people assume it does, and the wind is really hard to predict now, and it's just not what it used to be. And I immediately got labeled the weather guy. So yeah.
You were ahead of the curve on that one. You saw
apparently.
This one.
I did not expect it to become such a big topic for the Cubs in reality. I've always found it fascinating that it's kind of changed. And I think a lot of it, and we've talked about this on the podcast, a lot of it has to do with, I mean, climate change is certainly an aspect here, but like the video boards and the suite below us, the club that they have below the press box, the Catalina Club, that has changed the wind patterns because that used to be open there. So that means the wind could come through, meaning like if it was blowing out, that wind was coming through there. Now that they don't have that big open space to have the wind come through, I think that impacts it. It certainly is something that they talk about at Fenway, where like the upper deck or like a behind home plate wasn't there. I guess the press box and other things weren't there back in the day, and the ball used to go farther at Fenway Park. I mean, it's certainly it's real, right? Like you build something to block the wind, it's going to impact how the ball carries. So it's interesting. I don't know enough about weather to really like put any science behind it, but I find it fascinating and just observationally, it's harder to predict. I used to feel like it is 85 degrees and sunny and humid. It is blowing out. I don't need to look at the flags. And then you get to the ballpark and it's like, why is it blowing in? That used to not happen. So it's just a little weird. And I'm sure there's some science behind it and someone smarter than us could explain it. But yeah, I don't think, I think Counsell's answer is the right answer. You just build a good team. Just find good players, and you're both playing under the same conditions. So beat the other team. Just be better than them, I think, is the bottom line.
We're looking for real ways to boost our nutrition and just found a protein shake that actually tastes amazing. It's called Orgain, and it's been a game changer.
Orgain is the leader in real protein-powered nutrition that understands that being good for you doesn't have to taste bad. It's the organic ingredients we're looking for, but I don't want a grainy battle with my taste buds every day. You know what I'm saying? It's giving smooth milkshake vibes. That's Orgain, and they have a brand new 30-gram complete protein shake that offers protein-packed real nutrition designed to satisfy your cravings without all the sugar.
It gives me energy, provides muscle support, and helps manage hunger too. It's also made without soy ingredients and made with no artificial flavors or sweeteners. Orgain 30-gram protein shakes are available at Orgain.com. If you want to get in on the delicious protein-packed nutrition today, head to Orgain.com/FOUL and use the code FOUL for 20% off your order. Once again, that's Orgain.com/FOUL for 20% off. And make sure you use promo code FOUL so they know FT sent you.
Patrick, we got a question from Aaron Wilder, and it's something that you and I have bandied about.
Yeah.
And we have talked about this a little bit. You're definitely in tune with this. Should this be the offseason that Jed and company try to work out an extension with Justin Steele? He's still only 29, 3 really good seasons behind him, and I think we all know he loves it in Chicago, so there should be common ground to find a beneficial extension for both sides.
Definitely anticipate this being a thing this offseason. Don't know where it goes, but Steele's camp and the Cubs front office would not be doing their respective jobs if they did not at least explore this idea. And these conversations typically happen kind of in that arbitration window, and then sometimes it picks back up in spring training. And I would say Steele's agency, Wasserman, does have a pretty good track record here of they're very aggressive and effective, but they did that deal for Tyler Glasnow. Darvish has gotten an extension in San Diego. I feel like they are not quite as adamant as Scott Boras is when it comes to kind of testing free agency. Now, having said all that, I don't know if there is that fit. I mean, there is an idea from Steele's side, which would look at probably like a 5-year term, right? He's got 3 more arbitration cases, and you'd want to get a little more security on the back end. That is kind of the roadmap, I would say. There are some comps out there if you look at 5-year deals. But at the same time, this front office is a little different. It continues to evolve. Jed's been here a long time, but you have Carter Hawkins running things now. There's been some changes, restructurings around the front office. So I'm not sure if there's great historical comps from the Cubs side in terms of pushing in for something like this. I also don't think, their books are not in bad shape. It's not the blank slate that it was a couple of years ago when they were signing Nico and Happ to those sorts of deals. And on the pitching side, they aren't kind of as desperate as they were after trading away all those position players at the 21 deadline. So I think it was important that Steele pitched at the end of last year just to give everyone sort of another snapshot. I think they wanted to see him do it this year and kind of prove that he could build off that all-star season. And he did that in large part. But there was a freak injury at the beginning, an arm injury towards the end. And, he winds up with 24 starts and a tick under 135 innings of, real, almost excellence when he's healthy, but still not quite there as that 30 starts every year guy.
Right.
I feel like I realize I'm talking in circles here, but that's kind of what the conversation is going to be, right? Of course, Steele loves Chicago. Of course, the Cubs want Justin Steele around, but they already have him around and under club control. And Steele's going to get paid very well through arbitration because he does put up some of those numbers. So he's almost 30 as well, right? And how many more years are they going to tack on to the end of that, knowing that pitchers get hurt and he's been, not fully healthy, hasn't had that major injury that wipes out a huge chunk of his career, major league career. So I don't know, what's your kind of read side of what would you do if you were in Or if
Yeah,
you
so I mean, I'm looking at this in like a Jed Carter point of
Yeah.
view, and I start to wonder like why
Mhm.
why are you extending a guy that okay so this was his age 28 season, but the way this works with age X season is it cuts off at June 30th. He's a July 11th birthday, so it's almost his, if he was born
Yeah.
2 weeks earlier, we'd be talking about his age 29 season, right?
Yeah.
He turned 29 in July. So let's say next season he turns 30. The season after that he turns 31, and the season after that he turns 32. Right? So like we're talking about 3 more seasons that he's under control in his early 30s essentially. And then the extension would be mid 30s, right? Like if he gets added let's say a realistic extension adds 2 or 3 years, right?
Mhm.
Like that's what
Yeah.
you try to do. If those are guaranteed, that is just not happening. That's not how Jed and Carter are going to do business. I don't believe that. I don't believe that they would do that. Give him 3 more guaranteed years. He has been relatively healthy since he's been up in the big leagues. There's been like random injuries. The elbow stuff pops up every now and then, but he was like the big reason why he pitched at the end is because he was healthy. He was cleared to go. He had nothing wrong with him. Like the scans came back clean. There was nothing wrong. So I know people didn't fully
Mhm.
agree with that. Fans didn't, but he was fine. Like it was emphasized to us over and over again how he was fine, and neither the Cubs nor Justin Steele had any desire to jeopardize his future. Right.
Mhm.
So that should be a non-issue. It's going to be an issue with fans, I understand, but I don't think it is. But he does have Tommy John in his history. Like the reason he's an older guy right now going through ARB is because his development got stunted by Tommy John, right? And he was, and that's why it took him so long to get to the big leagues. I just, I just don't think it's the way they're going to do things. Like San Diego and AJ Preller, they'd be like, we need this guy. He's guaranteed 140 innings at least, which in today's game is a lot, right? And that's, I mean, I think that's kind of how you feel. Like he's going to give you 130, 140 innings, and if not, and if he's healthy, then he can give you 175. And that in today's game, that's just a lot. Like I know
Of
it's
high
like
quality innings.
yeah, like a high level. Like he was, according to Fangraphs, he was 4.8 WAR last year. He was 3 WAR this year. That's a very good pitcher for only 24 starts. He's great. He's convinced me that he's a legit, 2,
No doubt.
right?
Yeah.
Like on a good team. And I have no, like, I don't, like, I'm not concerned about his production. It's like, and I do wonder about the aging curve with him. If you want like the very simple, easy comp to go is with Lester, right?
Mhm.
And the reason the Cubs felt comfortable giving Lester all that money is because they thought he'd age well, right?
Mhm.
They compared him to Andy Pettit and his aging curve. So yeah, I don't I don't think it's what the Cubs would do. This front office, I just don't see them doing it. Me personally, I can understand that because of his age. And you brought it up, they're in a better spot with their pitching development.
Mhm. Yeah.
5 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever, they couldn't develop pitching. They had to like get it wherever they could, and they would have to pay for it. So I think this is a different situation. And I don't know if this is the offseason where the Cubs are going to be aggressive with it. I think they can be patient, and if they need to pay a little bit more because he throws 180 innings and that puts up a 3 ERA again, I think they'd be willing to do
They'd
that.
be happily do that. Yeah. Pay for that.
Then
And
rather
arm after
than
the fact. Yeah.
and they'll also have more information on Jordan Wicks, Ben Brown, Javier
Sure.
Assad, Cade Horton, all those guys,
Wisniewski,
right?
yeah.
Wisniewski. They'll have more information on those guys. If 3 of them emerge and throw 120 innings this year or something like that, right? Then they're like, well, why are we paying this guy $25 million a year? Why would we pay this guy $25 million a year, right? Then they start talking about, and again, I'm just thinking like they do. They start thinking about trading him or something like that for prospects, right? I'm not saying they should. I'm trying to think like this mindset of like
That's wild to think that a Steele extension question leads to them possibly.
Well,
But I get what you're saying.
I'm not saying they're
disagreeing with
that.
you.
I'm just saying that's
Yeah.
a thought process that you have to enter because
Yeah.
it is like a big. I remember Jed saying this soon after. I don't know. It was probably in the middle of the non-rebuild rebuild, where they're really struggling, and he was asked like, what did you learn from the first, that last group that you won
right.
with?
Yeah.
And basically he said I'd rather trade someone a year early than a year late. So like I think that's kind of their mindset now. Like that's part of, you have to be willing to move these guys. There's no such thing as like forever Cubs or whatever. I don't think they're going to look at it that way. I'm just, again, I'm not reporting that Justin Steele would be traded a year from now or anything like that. I'm saying you have to think like they do, and I think that's something that a year from now, if enough pitchers have developed and they feel good about where they are, then it's something that they may think about. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, do not assume extension with this group, especially with pitching. Pitching can get hurt at any moment. So, and they understand that. And at his age, I just think it may not make the most sense. Like, it may just make the most sense to keep him and let him walk.
Play it out. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that may be the best thing if he's pitching as well as it looks like he's going to.
Well, that's actually a good segue here. We had two questions that we wanted to kind of lump together because we're already conjuring trade scenarios. Kyle Welsh asks, what's your best guess on a Michael Busch style trade for 2025? That type of move that comes totally out of nowhere. And Paul Casco asks, is Nico Horner going to be traded so that Matt Shaw can take over second base? The floor is yours, Sahadev.
Yeah, I mean, is Nico going to be traded? I'm not saying 100% yes. I think these kind of tie in together because Nico is maybe that Michael Busch style trade. I think Nico, they're going to explore that, and I think understanding this front office, they're going to explore almost anything. Like, I don't think there is someone on this roster that you could say like, nope, they're not moving him. I guess not. Maybe Pete Crow Armstrong, but
the no trade clause guys and PCA probably be it. Yeah,
right. It's like, so it's your outfield, right, which you're kind of locked into. Then
probably keeping Shota, but yes.
Yes, probably keeping Shota. But yeah, like there's just not much that you'd say. Like, even like if they find the right deal, like if Paredes, like if they decide like they want to shift in that direction. Obviously, Dansby Swanson's contract makes him hard to move. But like, I just don't think there's anyone you can look at and say like, nope, they're not moving him. And when you say what's your best guess on a Michael Busch style trade, so that doesn't mean like that was essentially a challenge trade, right? Prospects for prospect. A move that totally comes out of nowhere. What if they trade Michael Busch? What if they think they can upgrade first base and go from a 120 weighted runs created plus to a 145? And that would be like getting Vlad Jr., right? I don't think the Blue Jays are moving him. Like there's rumors now that the Blue Jays are like going all in free agency and going to make like a Godfather offer to Juan Soto or something, right? Like I think the Blue Jays are more in like we're saving our jobs phase than let's trade our superstar first baseman whose father, who grew up in Canada and whose father played for Montreal.
Yeah, you got to get that done for the Blue Jays.
Yeah. I don't think you can do that, but that's an outside the box way, right? And so what I'm saying here is this front office looks at everything value-based assessments, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is Michael Busch's WAR? Okay, it's X, right? It's, let's say I don't have it up right now, but let's say it's 3, right? Can we get a 4.5 win player? Can we upgrade to a 4.5 win player? Can we upgrade to a 6 win player? Right? That like and what if that player is so his value according to Fangraphs is 2.3. What if you can get a 5 win player? Double that, right? and
Mhm.
and the cost, like, and then you look at the cost for that, and that's how they're doing it. That's how they're going to do it. Can you upgrade at second base? What if you trade Nico? Okay, what are you getting for Nico, and who are you replacing it with? That's how they're looking at it, value based. Like, so is what you're getting plus who you're replacing him more valuable, or does it help your team in a different way? That's how they're going to look at it. So they'll look at any area and say, can we upgrade this spot? Is it more like, and even like they're not going to trade Pete Crow Armstrong, but even him, they'll look at it in that way. If they get some crazy offer for him, they'll look at it in that way, because it's very much like this isn't gut feel. This isn't AJ Preller style, Dave Dombrowski style. This is very much like what's the value here? Like, what can we get? What are we losing and what are we gaining? And are we a better team because of that? That's how they're going to look at it. So who could be moved? I just wouldn't rule out very many people other than the guys that they can't move. And yes, I agree with you, Shota. You just put Shota on that list because it's like it's really hard to find a pitcher at that cost. Like, that value is going to be really hard. So it's dollar per WAR, right? Essentially, and that's kind of like what they're going to look at.
I read this as, I thought of your piece after the trade deadline of how the Cubs went after Logan O'Hoppe, that a Bush-style trade or moving Nico, like, do they do that type of deal to upgrade a catching situation that is kind of a glaring need? There isn't a great, obvious, like, free agent option that's a clear upgrade. That's kind of where I went immediately, not saying that's what's going to happen, but like you said, they'll exhaust every trade possibility this winter.
Yeah, catcher's going to be a priority, right? But I don't know if it's easily done. I think that we've talked about this and we'll continue to talk about it. I just don't know, they're not going to be able to pry O'Hoppe away. There's got to be other guys, and I don't know how easy it'll be to get any of those catchers, but they'll certainly explore it. And I appreciate that they did that. Like, they tried to get creative at the deadline, and we'll see what happens. We have time for one more, you think, Patrick?
Let's do one more here.
And I'm not sure if I said this, but we'll do a second mailbag piece this week because we got so many good questions from you guys. So there's going to be plenty of. Don't think we didn't. We're skipping your question. You have a chance to be in the next episode as well. Aaron Becker, or maybe Baker, has a two-part question. He says, with the number of position players already under contract, we've kind of touched on this, but how do the Cubs reshape this roster enough that it's not just a case of running it back and hoping for improvement? I think we answered that to a degree. I'm not sure if you have a specific idea there, Patrick, that goes beyond this. My other, like, I don't love this idea because, I mean, maybe you see if Ian Happ's willing to be moved, right? Like, is he willing to do that? I don't think he's.
Yeah, that seems like a waste of time.
Yeah, right. And it could.
That's my gut feel on that one.
Right, I agree. But other than that, like, we've touched on everything, right? Like, what it is. The more I think about it, the more I do think it's hard. How do you, like? I like Kevin Alcantara. I want to see what Kevin Alcantara can do. I don't know if he has a shot to do it with the Cubs. Like, so you got to get creative there, unless they're, you got to think about what you're doing there. Why don't, like, unless you have more to add to that, let me get to the second question. How does ownership view the payroll this year versus the performance achieved? Does the amount spent to underperform expectations this year make ownership less likely to spend in future seasons, even though the fan base already seems to regard them as cheap?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the awkward part for Jed Hoyer's front office when they have to meet with the Ricketts family, the board, however they work their, quarterly meetings, however it's structured, of like, this ownership group looked at the Red Sox a couple of years ago when, I want to say, they kind of did a half measure at the trade deadline. I think they still finished in last place and they tripped over the tax. It was just like that to them is like the worst case scenario. And I think that on the one hand, you do have, we've talked about this before, Jed is managing the payroll the way they want it to be managed, right? Of like focusing on the farm system, getting that steady supply of cheaper, younger talent, being, quote, rational in the free agent market, not doing those 13-year deals, not going all the way to the top of the market. Obviously, as fans, you may hate that. As media, we can question that philosophy, but there's a lot of alignment there in terms of like how Tom Ricketts views the game, how Jed Hoyer and Card Hawkins view the games. And honestly, Craig Counsell is a very rational human being as well. He may have some different thoughts, but he is not like a careless, off-the-cuff person by any means. And so I think what you're looking at here is this family has run the business sort of the same way almost continuously since they bought the team from Tribune Company. They view it as a, quote, closed loop. Now, we can question a lot of things because we don't get to see their books, but essentially what that means is they say whatever revenues they get, they pay the expenses, and leftover stuff goes to baseball operations. Now, there's lots of different ways for them to build their wealth and make other investments, etc.
Very
So
conveniently, all the land and all the
Yes.
property they own around the ballpark doesn't count.
But
That's a different business.
my understanding is that it's just simply not deficit spending. It's not like reacting to public outcries or certain, internal pressures. It's just like, this is their system. This is how it's set up. So more revenue comes in, whatever. They don't necessarily spend beyond whatever their projections are. Like clearly in San Diego, Peter Seidler, before he died, made some sort of kind of speculative calculation, right? Of like, I think he thought with the Chargers leaving town, with this great ballpark, kind of wild man executive, wheeling and dealing, some great talent on hand, and just saw a moment to like kind of bust up the model that had been in place in San Diego. The Cubs do not do that. They have their kind of steady operation, and I think without 1908, there is less urgency. Without someone like Theo Epstein kind of agitating, I think it is a different dynamic in Wrigleyville. But at the same time, there are, I go back to after the 2015 NLCS when they get swept, and like that was a moment where business and baseball operations worked together and said, all right, let's kind of do 2 off seasons in one. They see this core, they see this opportunity, and they went a lot bigger than they thought. Kind of heading into the GM meetings, like they had amazing winter meetings, and that was not what they envisioned. Kind of at the GM meetings, that it took some work, some planning, some creativity, and so I would take Tom Ricketts at his word on this. He's been pretty consistent of that. They view the luxury tax threshold as sort of a general range of where they want to end up each year. They may go over, they may stay under. They're aware of the penalties and various calculations. And from there, they kind of want to respond to the moment. And Tom Ricketts was someone who kind of pushed the Nick Castellanos deal over the line of just like, this team needs something. I'm going to pay for it. Get it done. That is obviously not the prevailing narrative around Tom Ricketts at this time. I mean, there's a letter that came out, and our colleague John Greenberg at The Athletic wrote that up. But like, this is, like it or not, this is sort of the Cubs' plan, is to have like that stable kind of flow of resources where it's not having to do what they did in COVID, which was kind of just splash. But that each year, Jed Hoyer running baseball operations has a pretty good idea of what's coming, what the limitations are, what the advantages are, what the landscape is, and then it's totally up to him and his staff to use it however they see fit. I think it's clearly not satisfying. It has not been good enough. I think you could also see like how that could work, right? If the Cubs the year prior won one more game, if certain things fell a different way this year, it's like not out of the realm of possibility that we'd be talking about like a pretty good operation, right? And not having a lot of these not overly positive questions in this offseason mailbag that will be a regular feature for us.
Right. I just have a couple quick things to add. Like I always dislike when it's like black or white, right? And like so to call him cheap bothers me a little because it's not that he's cheap, right? There's nuance here, but they're like 9th or 10th in payroll depending on how you want to look at it. And in my like the landscape has changed. Why are they 9th or 10th? They should always be, in my opinion, in the top 5 or hovering around there. This is they're too low. Teams have passed them up, and I think that doesn't make them cheap. It just I think they should be more aggressive with their payroll. I also think there's an argument to be made of you are far and away the biggest payroll in the NL Central. Why are you not doing better in the NL Central? Yeah. Right. So this comes back to the dollar per WAR or whatever I was discussing before. I don't love analyzing it in that way, but are they getting the most bang for their buck? Right. Obviously not. There are teams in the playoffs that have significantly lesser payroll than them, including like Detroit was like nothing, right? Of their active payroll, it was like 20 something or something insane, right? That's not their actual payroll because of guys that were hurt like Javier Baez. But the Cubs are not efficient in that fashion, not like Milwaukee, not like Cleveland, not like Tampa Bay. And that's really what they're trying to get to, right? If you're efficient like that, and you have the highest payroll in NL Central, nobody's complaining about you not being in the top 5, right? And then Tom Ricketts looks like a genius and gets what he wants. That is what Tom Ricketts wants. Yeah. He wants to be able to spend the 10th, the 8th highest payroll in the current landscape, how things are. He doesn't want to spend like San Diego. He doesn't want to spend like obviously not the Mets. Philly, that's the other team I was thinking of. Like Philly and San Diego, when they pass you up, in my opinion, that shouldn't happen, right? I get fans want them to spend like LA and the New York teams. I understand that's not going to happen, but it would be nice to see them right behind them, and we're not seeing that. So I get the frustration from fans, but essentially what needs to happen, if that's not going to happen, you just need, if you can accept that that's not happening, now it's up to Jed and Carter and everyone to be more efficient with the payroll that you do have. And that's the bottom line. Like, so, my assumption is not after this season, this past season, but one more year of this. And that's when Tom starts to say like, come on, other teams are more efficient with their payroll. Like you need to be better with it. Like you need to find the right players. I'm giving you enough money to win because look at all these teams, Arizona and Milwaukee, because he's not going to point to what the World Series is, maybe Yankees, Dodgers, or whatever. It's either going to be like one of the teams is going to be a top 3 payroll, right? in the World Series.
Yeah, and maybe two. Yeah.
Right. So he's not going to point to that. He's going to point to Cleveland. Like you pointed to Arizona last year. So that's and it's a fair point in the sense like you have to be efficient with the money that you spend and put out a better roster, put out a better team. And that's the better bottom line. Like they need to be better. And we're always going to come back to that, be better, because when you don't make the playoffs, you're not good enough. And that should be the minimum expectation. All right. Yeah, we will be back later this week with more of your questions. I always enjoy answering all of the questions and going through these things. It helps us think through things as well. Thanks so much for listening. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe to The Athletic, where Patrick and I are on top of the Cubs offseason. Thanks so much for listening and reading. We really appreciate all of you. Take care.